Friday afternoon at 4:17 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was watching the clock, thinking about weekend plans when my phone buzzed. Conference Room B. Now. The message came from Veronica Lucas, my boss for the past 2 years at Access Consulting. Something felt wrong immediately. Nobody calls emergency meetings 43 minutes before the weekend unless someone's getting fired. I walked down the hallway, past cubicles where my coworkers avoided eye contact. The air conditioning hummed too loud. My badge beeped as I swiped into the conference room. Veronica sat at the head of the table with Kendra from HR, both wearing the same fake serious expression. "Sit down, Asher," Veronica said without looking up from her laptop. Kendra shuffled papers nervously. I'd seen this dance before with other employees. My stomach dropped. "We're letting you go, effective immediately," she announced like she was reading the weather forecast. "Performance issues and cultural fit problems." Performance issues? I just closed the biggest deal of my career 3 days ago. Beacon Industries had signed a $1.2 million consulting contract after 6 months of my work. My work. Not hers. Mine. "I don't understand," I said, though I was starting to. Veronica finally looked at me and smiled. That cold, satisfied smile I'd been seeing more often lately. 3 months earlier, everything had been different. I was Veronica's golden boy, the project manager who could turn difficult clients into long-term partnerships. That changed the day I walked past her office and heard her on a conference call with the executive board. "The Q2 strategy has been incredibly successful," she was saying. "My comprehensive approach to client retention has exceeded all projections." Her strategy? I had written every page of that report. I'd spent nights and weekends researching market trends, analyzing competitor weaknesses, and developing the framework that saved 3 major accounts. She hadn't contributed a single idea. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening to her take credit for months of my work. Other employees walked past, but I couldn't move. She was describing my client relationship techniques as if she'd invented them. "The board is particularly impressed with my innovative approach to crisis management," she continued. Crisis management. Last month, when Henderson Corp threatened to pull their contract over billing disputes, I'd spent 16 hours straight on damage control. I'd flown to Detroit, sat in their boardroom, and rebuilt their trust from scratch. Veronica had been at a spa weekend in Napa. That's when I realized what was happening. She wasn't just my boss anymore. She was my competition. And she was playing a game I didn't even know had started. The red flags started small. Emails sent to the team that somehow forgot to include me. Meetings scheduled during my lunch breaks, then rescheduled when I returned. Client reports that had my research but her name as primary author. I started keeping records. Not for revenge, just protection. I'd been in corporate America long enough to know that paper trails save careers. Every email got forwarded to my personal account. Every project file got backed up. Every client interaction got documented with timestamps. Veronica began excluding me from strategy meetings while asking me to implement decisions I hadn't been part of making. When I asked questions, she'd say I was overthinking things, or not seeing the big picture. The big picture was becoming clearer every day. She wanted me gone, but she needed my results first. One morning, I logged into our shared project drive to update the Beacon Industries file. The folder was empty. Completely wiped. Panicking, I checked the activity log. According to the system, I had deleted everything at 3:47 a.m. I was asleep at 3:47 a.m. I called IT immediately. "Someone used your login credentials," the tech guy explained. "But the system shows it came from your workstation." My workstation that only Veronica had access to as department head. She was setting me up. Beacon Industries became my lifeline and my target. Charles Morrison, their CEO, was the kind of client every consultant dreams about. Smart, direct, and willing to pay for results. When they hired Access Consulting, I was assigned as project lead. Their problem was complex. A data breach had destroyed customer confidence, and competitors were circling like sharks. They needed a complete reputation rebuild, new security protocols, and a marketing strategy that would restore trust. I worked 18-hour days for 2 months. I learned their business inside and out, built relationships with their entire leadership team, and developed a recovery plan that addressed every angle of their crisis. The breakthrough came during a late-night call with their board. I'd identified the real source of their vulnerability, not the breach itself, but their response to it. They'd been defensive when they should have been transparent. We need to own the mistake completely, I told them. Then show customers exactly how we've fixed it. The strategy worked. Customer retention rates climbed. New contracts started flowing in. Their stock price recovered. Charles sent a thank you gift to the office, a bottle of expensive whiskey with a note praising my exceptional dedication and insight. I never saw either the bottle or the note. Veronica intercepted the package and never mentioned it. I only found out months later when Charles asked why I'd never acknowledged his gift. The team meeting where everything changed happened on a Tuesday morning. Veronica called everyone into the main conference room and started praising my work on the Beacon account. Asher has shown real dedication to this project, she announced to the group. His attention to detail and client focus represent exactly what we value at Access Consulting. Everyone nodded approvingly. I felt proud for about 30 seconds. That afternoon, I discovered she'd sent an email to the executive board with a very different message. A coworker who'd been accidentally copied forwarded it to me. I have concerns about Asher's emotional involvement with the Beacon account, the email read. His inability to maintain professional boundaries is becoming problematic. He appears burned out and may need intervention before it affects our client relationships. Emotional involvement? Professional boundaries? I delivered results beyond everyone's expectations, but apparently caring about success was now a weakness. The email continued, I recommend transitioning primary client contact to shared oversight to ensure continuity and appropriate distance. She was positioning my success as a failure. My dedication as instability. My results as evidence that I couldn't be trusted. The meeting praise had been theater. The email was the real message. I printed the email and added it to my growing file of evidence. The whisper campaign started immediately. Colleagues who used to grab lunch with me suddenly became busy. Conversations stopped when I walked into rooms. Someone was spreading poison, and I could guess who. The rumors were subtle but effective. I was difficult to manage. I had boundary issues with clients. I was resistant to feedback. None of it was true, but truth wasn't the point. Janet from accounting mentioned it casually during a coffee break. I heard you've been struggling with the workload, she said with fake concern. If you need to talk to someone about stress management, HR has resources. Struggling with workload? I just delivered the biggest success in the department's history. Who said I was struggling? I asked. She backpedaled immediately. Oh, nobody specific. Just general concern. Later that week, I found an unsigned performance warning on my desk. It was dated a week earlier, but I'd never seen it before. The document cited attitude concerns and client relationship violations without providing specific examples. I took the document straight to HR. Kendra looked uncomfortable as he read it. This should have been discussed with you directly, he admitted. Let me look into how this was processed. He never got back to me. When I followed up, he claimed he was still investigating and would circle back soon. Meanwhile, my access to certain client files began disappearing. Confronting HR felt like talking to a brick wall. Kendra listened to my concerns with practiced sympathy, nodding at appropriate moments and taking notes he'd probably never read. These sound like communication issues, he concluded. Have you tried addressing them directly with Veronica? Address them directly? With the person who was orchestrating my professional destruction? She's been excluding me from meetings and taking credit for my work, I explained. I have documentation. Kendra's expression remained neutral. Performance evaluations and project assignments are management decisions. If you have specific concerns about harassment or discrimination, we can explore formal procedures. Harassment or discrimination. Those were the magic words that would require actual investigation. But I was a white male being undermined by a white female supervisor. Good luck proving anything. Over the following days, my access to systems continued disappearing. First, I lost edit privileges on shared documents. Then my client contact database became read-only. Finally, my project management dashboard went completely dark. When I called IT, they said every restriction had been authorized by Veronica. Is there a specific reason for the changes? I asked. I just processed the requests, the technician replied. You'd have to ask whoever submitted them. I knew better than to ask Veronica directly. Instead, I started working from my personal backups and documenting every access denial. The trap was closing, but I was still gathering evidence. The final insult came disguised as good news. Veronica called me into her office with a bright smile and congratulations. The Beacon renewal went through, she announced. Charles signed for another year at $1.2 million. It's a tremendous win for the department. I waited for acknowledgement of my role in the success. Instead, she continued with different news. Of course, managing an account this size is a huge responsibility. I've decided to bring in additional support to ensure we don't drop the ball. Additional support meant sharing credit. Sharing credit meant reducing my value. I'd like you to start training Levi from the junior team, she said. He'll be taking over day-to-day client contact so you can focus on other projects. Levi was fresh out of college with zero consulting experience. Charles Morrison would eat him alive in the first meeting. Veronica, I built this relationship from nothing. Charles trusts me specifically. Her smile never wavered. I'm sure he'll adapt. Change is good for everyone. The message was clear. My most valuable client relationship was being taken away, and I was expected to be grateful for the opportunity to train my replacement. I need you to transfer all Beacon files to Levi by end of day Friday, she added. Clean handoff, comprehensive documentation. End of day Friday. 3 days to package up 6 months of work and hand it to someone who wouldn't know the difference between a crisis management plan and a coffee order. I nodded and left her office, my mind already racing. Back to that Friday afternoon conference room, where everything was ending exactly as I'd feared. Veronica's satisfied smile. Kendra's uncomfortable shuffling. The badge that would stop working before I reached the parking garage. Performance issues, she'd said. Cultural fit problems. After delivering their biggest contract renewal. After 6 months of 18-hour days and weekend work. After building relationships that had saved the company thousands of dollars in lost accounts. This seems sudden, I said, though I knew it wasn't sudden at all. It was the culmination of months of careful planning. We've been monitoring the situation for some time, Veronica replied. The decision is final. Kendra slid a folder across the table. Termination paperwork, confidentiality agreements, final paycheck calculations. They'd prepared everything in advance. You'll need to return your laptop, company credit card, and building access badge immediately, Veronica continued. Security will escort you to your desk to collect personal items. Security escort. Like I was a criminal instead of the employee who'd just generated more revenue than anyone else in the department. Any questions? Kendra asked, clearly hoping the answer was no. I had plenty of questions, but none they'd answer honestly. Instead, I signed their papers, handed over my badge, and followed the security guard to my cubicle. Co-workers watched from the corners of their eyes as I packed my personal belongings into a cardboard box. Nobody said goodbye. Veronica appeared one last time as I headed toward the elevator. "You're not a team player, Asher," she said quietly. "This is just business." Just business. The phrase would replay in my head all weekend. Saturday was a blur of anger and self-pity. I stayed in bed until noon, ordering delivery food and ignoring phone calls from concerned friends. Sunday morning felt different, though. Instead of rage, I felt something cleaner. Clarity. I'd been fighting the wrong battle. Trying to prove my worth to someone who'd already decided I was worthless. Trying to save a job at a company that treated loyalty as a liability. The real question wasn't why they'd fired me. It was what I planned to do about it. First, I drafted thank you emails to every client I'd worked with over the past 2 years. Not complaints about Access Consulting, just gratitude for the opportunity to serve them. Professional, warm, and memorable. Second, I researched the legal requirements for starting a consulting practice. Business license, liability insurance, tax implications. All manageable. Third, I made a list of every client relationship I'd built independently. Not company connections that belonged to Access, but personal relationships that belonged to me. The list was longer than I'd expected. By Sunday evening, I wasn't an unemployed victim anymore. I was an entrepreneur in development. Monday morning, I started making phone calls. The support came from unexpected places. Former clients who'd wondered why I'd stopped returning their calls. Co-workers who'd witnessed Veronica's behavior but stayed silent to protect their own jobs. Even competitors who'd heard whispers about Access's internal problems. My phone rang constantly that first week. "What happened? Are you okay?" That place was always toxic. The most important call came Tuesday afternoon. Charles Morrison from Beacon Industries. "Asher, I heard some disturbing news." His voice was concerned but controlled. "Someone said you left Access Consulting." "That's correct," I replied carefully. "As of Friday." "Mind if I ask what happened?" "You were the best project manager we've ever worked with." I chose my words carefully. Differences of opinion about account management and client relationships. Charles was quiet for a moment. "Would you be interested in meeting for coffee? I have a business proposition that might interest you." Coffee with Charles Morrison. The client Veronica thought she now owned. "I'd be happy to meet," I said. "How's tomorrow morning? And Asher, bring your business cards." I didn't have business cards yet, but I'd figure that out. The coffee shop was neutral territory, far from Access's downtown office. Charles arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the expression of someone who'd made a decision. "Let me be direct," he said after we'd ordered. "Veronica called yesterday to introduce herself as my new point of contact. She spent 20 minutes explaining why change would be beneficial for our account." I sipped my coffee and waited. "She said you'd quit because you were overwhelmed by the responsibility. Said Access was bringing in fresh perspectives to better serve our needs." The lies came so naturally to her. "What's your version?" Charles asked. I told him the truth. Not with bitterness or blame, just facts. The credit theft, the systematic undermining, the Friday afternoon ambush. Charles listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. "She said you quit," he repeated when I finished. "I was terminated for performance issues, according to my paperwork." Charles closed his portfolio and leaned forward. "Asher, would you consider consulting with Beacon directly? Independent of Access?" The question I'd been hoping for but hadn't dared to expect. "I'd be very interested in discussing that," I replied. "Good. Because we have a new project coming up, and I want someone I trust handling it." Someone he trusted. Not Access Consulting. Not Veronica Lucas. Me. We spent the next hour discussing details. Timeline, scope, compensation. By the time we finished, I had my first client. And Access Consulting had lost their biggest account. Setting up Zint Consulting took exactly 1 week. Business license, insurance policy, bank account, website, business cards. Nothing fancy, but professional enough to inspire confidence. My home office was a spare bedroom with a desk, computer, and phone. Overhead costs, practically zero. Stress level, dramatically lower. Control over my work, complete. Beacon's new project was perfect for a solo consultant. They needed crisis management training for their executive team, something I could deliver better than any large firm. Personal attention, customized content, direct access to the consultant. Charles signed the contract without negotiating terms. "One question," he said during our final meeting. "Should I inform Access that we're transitioning this project?" Access Consulting would bill Beacon for work they'd never deliver, since I was no longer available to actually do it. "I think professional courtesy suggests they should be notified," I replied. Charles smiled. "I'll send them a brief email today." That brief email would land on Veronica's desk like a bomb. The client she thought she'd stolen was walking away, taking their money with him. A week later, my phone rang again. Sandra Luke from Morrison Industries, another former client. "I heard you're consulting independently now," she said. "We have a project that might interest you." Word was traveling fast through Chicago's business community. The consultant who'd been quietly building relationships for 2 years was now available for hire. And those relationships were choosing to follow him. Back at Access Consulting, chaos was spreading like wildfire. I heard about it through Levi, the junior consultant who was supposed to replace me on the Beacon account. He called me Wednesday morning, sounding panicked. "Asher, I don't know what to do. Charles Morrison is refusing to work with me. He says he's never heard of me and doesn't understand why his project manager changed." Of course Charles was refusing. I'd spent months earning his trust, understanding his business, proving my competence. Levi was a stranger with good intentions but no experience. "Veronica told me to fix this immediately," Levi can't. Understand why that wasn't possible. When I explained you'd left the company, he said he wasn't informed and needed to reconsider the contract. Veronica had clearly failed to mention my termination when she introduced herself as the new point of contact. Clients tend to notice when their trusted advisors disappear without explanation. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Levi asked desperately. I felt bad for him, but this wasn't my problem to solve anymore. "I'd suggest having Veronica contact Charles directly to clarify the situation," I said. Levi thanked me and hung up. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from Charles Morrison. "Access's new contact seems confused about our relationship. Should I be concerned?" The dominoes were starting to fall. The email arrived on a Thursday morning, copied to half of Access Consulting's executive team. Charles Morrison's assistant had sent it, but the message was clearly from Charles himself. "Due to changes in Access Consulting's account management structure, Beacon Industries will be transitioning our current project to Zint Consulting, effective immediately. Please coordinate transfer of all project assets and documentation with Asher Zint at your earliest convenience." Direct, professional, and devastating. Beacon Industries wasn't just pulling their current project, they were publicly announcing their decision to work with me instead. The email copy list included Veronica, Kendra from HR, and 3 senior partners. Everyone would know exactly why Beacon was leaving and exactly where they were going. My phone rang within an hour. Unknown number with Access's area code. "This is highly inappropriate." Veronica's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "You've clearly violated your confidentiality agreement by soliciting our clients." I'd been expecting this call. "I haven't solicited anyone," I replied calmly. "Charles Morrison contacted me directly." "You're actively interfering with our business relationships. I'm providing consulting services to a client who requested them. That's not interference, it's business." She was quiet for a moment, probably realizing her accusations had no legal foundation. "This isn't over, Asher." "I agree," I said. "It's actually just beginning." After I hung up, I pulled out the folder of documentation I'd been collecting for months. Every email where she'd taken credit for my work. Every meeting where she'd undermined my authority. Every client interaction she'd tried to control. If Veronica wanted a war, she'd picked the wrong enemy. The fractures at Access Consulting became visible quickly. Losing the Beacon account created a revenue gap that couldn't be hidden from leadership. Veronica tried to spin it as an unfortunate client decision, but other people had witnessed the transition. Janet from accounting mentioned it during a chance encounter at the grocery store. "There's been tension in the executive meeting since Beacon left," she confided. Questions about why such a successful client would suddenly change firms. Questions Veronica couldn't answer without admitting she'd fired the project manager Beacon specifically requested to work with. "Has anyone mentioned my name?" I asked. Janet nodded. "Levi accidentally said something about you being the preferred contact." Veronica shut him down quickly, but people heard. Levi, still trying to manage an account he'd never been prepared for, accidentally revealing truths that undermined Veronica's narrative. The second shoe dropped when Morrison Industries pulled their contract renewal. They didn't announce it publicly or copy executive leadership. They simply informed Access that their services would no longer be required. That contract had been worth $300,000 annually. Combined with Beacon's departure, Veronica's department had lost nearly $500,000 in recurring revenue. Leadership began asking uncomfortable questions about client retention and account management practices. Meanwhile, my consulting practice was growing faster than I'd anticipated. 2 clients had become 4, then 6. I needed help. Finding the right employee wasn't difficult. I knew exactly who I wanted: Tracy Wilson, a talented junior associate who'd been pushed out of Access 6 months earlier. Officially, she'd been restructured. Unofficially, she'd questioned one of Veronica's decisions publicly. Tracy jumped at the opportunity to join Zint Consulting. She was smart, hardworking, and motivated by something stronger than money: the chance to prove Veronica wrong. "I heard what happened to you," she said during our interview. Same pattern she used on me. Isolation, credit theft, then termination for mysterious performance issues. Tracy brought valuable insights about Access's internal dysfunction and client satisfaction problems. She also brought contacts other former employees who'd been pushed out for similar reasons. The business community was smaller than most people realized. Word traveled fast when talented consultants became available. Word traveled even faster when those consultants had been unfairly treated by their previous employer. Within 2 months, Zint Consulting had 8 employees, all working from a small downtown office. Professional, efficient, and focused on results instead of politics. Access Consulting lost another contract that month. Then another. Each departure was explained as a normal business decision, but the pattern was becoming obvious. Clients were following relationships, not company names. And most of those relationships belonged to people who no longer worked at Access. The document that destroyed Veronica's career arrived anonymously, but I suspected the source. someone inside Access had finally decided to act. It was a client satisfaction report covering the past 18 months, comparing project outcomes across different account managers. The data was devastating for Veronica and flattering for me. Every client I'd managed showed above-average satisfaction scores, retention rates, and revenue growth. Every project Veronica had directly controlled showed declining metrics across the board. The report landed on the desk of Access's managing partner on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, Kendra from HR was conducting informal interviews with current and former employees. By Friday, the story had reached the local business journal. Local consulting firm faces client retention crisis, ran as the headline. The article didn't mention Veronica by name, but anyone in the industry could read between the lines. Access Consulting has lost several major accounts in recent months, raising questions about internal management practices and client relationship strategies, the reporter had written. The article quoted an unnamed industry source. When talented project managers leave and clients follow them immediately, it suggests deeper problems than normal employee turnover. Veronica tried to control the narrative by blaming departing employees for violating professional ethics and interfering with established relationships. But her explanations sounded defensive and desperate. Meanwhile, my phone kept ringing with new business inquiries. Potential clients who'd read about Access's problems and wanted to work with the consultants who'd left. Success was becoming its own marketing strategy. Veronica's counterattack came through legal channels, as I'd expected. Access Consulting sent a formal letter demanding I cease all contact with their former clients and return any proprietary information I might have taken. The letter was professionally written but legally groundless. I hadn't stolen trade secrets or violated confidentiality agreements. I'd simply continued working with clients who'd chosen to hire me directly. My attorney, Sandra Pierce, read the letter with amusement. "This is intimidation, not litigation," she explained. "They're hoping you'll panic and stop competing with them." Instead, Sandra sent a response that was polite but firm. I had every right to pursue business relationships with clients who contacted me voluntarily. Access's threats had no legal foundation. The response included a subtle warning of our own. If Access continued making false accusations about my business practices, we'd consider that defamatory and respond accordingly. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected invitation. The Chicago Business Council was hosting a leadership panel about entrepreneurship and industry disruption. They wanted me to participate. The event sponsor? Access Consulting. Veronica would be in the audience, watching me discuss business ethics and client relationships on a stage her company had paid for. The irony was too perfect to decline. The panel discussion was held at a downtown hotel, with about 200 business leaders in attendance. I shared the stage with 3 other entrepreneurs, each discussing different aspects of starting independent ventures. When my turn came, I talked about integrity, client service, and the importance of treating people with respect. I didn't mention Access Consulting by name, but I didn't need to. Sometimes talented people are held back by organizations that prioritize politics over performance, I said, looking out at the audience. When those people find the courage to leave, they often discover their worth was never the problem. The audience responded with appreciative murmurs and sustained applause. During the Q&A session, someone asked about competitive challenges and industry relationships. "The best marketing strategy is simple," I replied. "Do excellent work, treat clients with respect, and let your results speak for themselves. If you focus on politics and manipulation instead of performance, eventually that catches up with you." In the back of the room, I could see Veronica sitting with her arms crossed, her face red with barely contained anger. After the panel ended, several audience members approached with business cards and consulting inquiries. One was the CEO of a company that had recently fired Access Consulting for unresponsive account management. "I think we should talk," he said, handing me his card. As I walked to my car, I felt a sense of completion. The truth had been told publicly, professionally, and without apology. Justice was starting to look a lot like success. The final blow to Access Consulting came from an unexpected source, their own clients. Word had spread through Chicago's business community about the leadership panel and the subtle message I'd delivered about treating people with respect. 3 major clients pulled their contracts within 2 weeks. Not because they'd been solicited or pressured, but because they'd started asking questions about how Access treated their employees. Companies that valued loyalty and integrity didn't want to work with firms that demonstrated neither. The tipping point was Hamilton Corp, Access's oldest and most prestigious client. Their CEO, William Hamilton, had attended the leadership panel and been impressed by the discussion of business ethics. When Hamilton learned about the circumstances surrounding my termination and the systematic way other talented consultants had been pushed out, he made a decision that sent shockwaves through the industry. Hamilton Corp announced they were ending their relationship with Access Consulting and awarding their annual contract to Zint Consulting instead. The contract was worth $800,000. That afternoon, Veronica was placed on executive leave pending internal review. The euphemistic language couldn't hide the reality: she was finished. Access's managing partner released a statement about restructuring leadership to better serve client needs and maintain company values. Translation: Veronica had been sacrificed to save the firm's reputation. Too little, too late. The phone call I'd been expecting finally came on a Tuesday evening. Veronica's voice was different now, smaller, desperate, stripped of the arrogance that had defined our relationship. "Asher, we need to talk." I let the silence stretch before responding. "What can I do for you, Veronica?" "I made mistakes," she said quietly. "I let competition and pressure cloud my judgment. I'm sorry." An apology. 18 months too late, but still surprising. "I appreciate you saying that. I'm calling because I'm exploring new opportunities," she continued. "I wondered if you might have any openings at your firm." The audacity was breathtaking. After systematic sabotage, public humiliation, and legal threats, she wanted me to hire her. "Veronica, I wish you the best in your job search," I replied calmly. "But Zint Consulting isn't the right fit." "Asher, please. I know I handled things badly, but I learned from those mistakes. I could be valuable to your team. I'm sure you'll find something appropriate," I said. "Good luck." I ended the call and set down my phone. Revenge would have been hanging up immediately or telling her exactly what I thought of her request. This wasn't revenge. This was professional courtesy extended to someone who'd never shown me the same consideration. An hour later, I poured myself a coffee and stood on my office balcony, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Closure, I realized, was a quiet thing. 1 year later, Zint Consulting occupied a full floor of a downtown office building. 22 employees, 15 major clients, and annual revenue approaching $3 million. We'd grown carefully, hiring people who valued integrity over politics and results over games. Access Consulting still existed, but barely. They'd lost 60% of their client base and most of their senior staff. The managing partner had been forced to sell majority control to a larger firm that specialized in turnaround situations. Veronica had found work at a small firm in Milwaukee. According to industry gossip, she was performing adequately under close supervision. Sometimes people could change, but rarely without consequences teaching them why they needed to. Tracy Wilson had been promoted to senior partner at Zint Consulting. Levi, the junior consultant who'd been thrown into the Beacon account, had joined us 6 months earlier. He was thriving in an environment where talent was developed instead of exploited. "Do you ever regret leaving Access?" Tracy asked during our monthly leadership meeting. I thought about it for a moment. The fear of starting over, the uncertainty of those first few weeks, the stress of building something from nothing. "No," I said finally. "Getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to my career." Sometimes what looks like an ending is actually a beginning in disguise. The Business Journal article ran exactly 1 year after my termination from Access Consulting. From fired to Forbes, local consultant builds $1 million practice after workplace termination. The reporter had done her research, interviewing clients, former colleagues, and industry leaders. The story that emerged was one of resilience, integrity, and the power of relationships built on trust rather than manipulation. The article mentioned Access Consulting only briefly, noting their leadership transition and strategic refocusing in language that fooled no one. More importantly, it established Zint Consulting as a case study in how to succeed by doing the right thing consistently over time. My phone rang constantly for weeks after the article published. Job seekers who wanted to work for a company with actual values. Clients who were tired of dealing with firms that prioritized ego over service. Competitors who wanted to understand how we'd grown so quickly. The answer was simpler than most people expected: treat people well, deliver excellent work, and let results speak louder than politics. Revolutionary concepts in today's business environment. The article included a quote that captured everything I'd learned: success isn't about winning against other people. It's about building something valuable that other people want to be part of. That philosophy had turned a devastating termination into the foundation of something bigger than I'd ever imagined possible. This morning I walked into our office and saw the framed quote hanging on the wall that Tracy had installed last month: know your worth. Then add interest. The coffee was already brewing in our kitchen, where the team gathered each morning to discuss projects and share ideas. No politics, no backstabbing, no credit theft. Just talented people working together toward common goals. My calendar showed meetings with 3 potential new clients, a strategy session with our senior staff, and a phone call with Charles Morrison about expanding our partnership with Beacon Industries. Charles had become more than a client over the past year. He was a friend, mentor, and advocate who'd helped Zint Consulting grow by introducing us to other business leaders who valued integrity over intimidation. You know what I learned from watching you handle that situation, he'd told me recently. Real strength isn't about destroying other people. It's about building something better than what they tried to take from you. At 4:17 p.m., the exact time I'd been fired from Access Consulting, I stood at my office window looking out at Chicago's skyline. Somewhere across the city, Veronica was probably finishing another day at her new job, managing smaller accounts under careful supervision. I felt no satisfaction in her diminished circumstances and no anger about what she'd done to me. Those emotions belonged to a different person living a different life. The person I'd become was grateful. Grateful for the firing that had freed me from a toxic environment. Grateful for the clients who'd chosen relationships over corporate loyalty. Grateful for the team that had helped build something meaningful from the wreckage of someone else's mistakes. It didn't happen overnight. But it happened exactly the way it should.